Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the second channel. Sorry for the lack of content in January, but we're back with new content now that we're in February. We've got some poetry today from an author by the name of Vaughan, and this is going to be interesting. So I'll tell you everything you need to know. First, if you want to find more of Kip's work, you'll want to visit this website, which is called learningtowalkagain.life. And Kip is also on Blue Sky, so you can check out his work there. This is what Kip said when submitting this work for us. I should mention most of the work I've been trained to do is in graphic design and web design. As I have built up my portfolio in the last 5 years, I also became a writer, so I would have content to fill in around the web design tech. I'm most interested in going over poetry, since I'm so new to it, and likely where I still have the most to learn. Okay. So yeah, this is a website. So a lot of what we're going to be looking at today is kind of graphic design and web design on top of being poetry. So it's going to be kind of an interesting foray. I should also note Kip is one of my patrons, and so I want to give a huge thanks to Kip for the support. And so we might spend a little longer in this video than we usually would on a second channel video. So with all that in mind, let's take a look. We've got a few pages. We'll see how much we can get through. So this is just the home page, learningtowalkagain.life. I'm going to assume that these 5 stanzas are all part of the same poem. So we'll just jump in right here. In the book of Revelations, I am told about a street of gold. What is the significance of this avenue unseen? It is this image of importance that we are being sold, yet it is hard to know what it can mean. I found a different hint of gold, but breaking from the sunrise. The early break of day, the light makes its way, lengthwise, warming the orange bricks and yellow doors, stylize. This beautiful amber ablaze to start the glow of the student's day. At one point in searching for jobs, I would have taken work that utilized my latest skill set. After a while, I realized I lost touch with what I really wanted to be. When this young me walked in the forest trails behind his parents' house, how did he interpret the world? What was he trying to get out of life? There were values in that purity that I am trying to find again. Only this time I have new abilities and understanding to help guide me. When I go back to the school I grew up in, I still have memories of my grandparents encouraging me at the end of my concerts. This is a thought I return to when thinking about the part of education that mattered to me. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to assume that's all one poem. Maybe not. Maybe this entire page is all one poem. I'm going to keep going, and then we'll talk. These words I recall, still echoing Miss Hall, dreaming of what I could be, as I start branching out from my tree. Though my performance at times was fair, to cheer a developing mind, the reason is laid so bare. You showed to me all I could be, to the near furthest extent. Brain maturity a decade away, so my purpose seeking cannot relent. Beautiful windows laid out in rows of glass square, though numerous, are broken 3/4 a century in. This architectural flourish relinquished of care, tired exterior sheltering radiance within. Enormous tall buildings arise to what was once only a medium-sized city, reaching to the skies with such splendor so exceedingly pretty. And yet, the extravagant hundreds of millions dollar decor to me doesn't really fascinate because this beauty the structures sure lack a critical component to their substrate. Here, high schoolers revisit knowing it's not, here, high schoolers revisit knowing it's not just a stage, one that was all about them, but civic beyond one range of age. It is this place built on the values at its roots, the donations to make the lives of future bright. With laundry and foods to kids in need, this to me all computes. The needs are supplied and right effort working tight. During this time, I diligently write out these lines, this old upbringing, my new creative fuel, the effervescence that nourishes my cognitive vines. What a strange sight I see driving past this school. As it is now covered in plastic wrap from ceiling to floor, A window renovation levy passed years ago, so that eagles can now have a place to be proud to soar. It is something to this generation which we really do owe. I have to wonder what it would be like to have the kid me in charge of this project. That person is more in touch with what I was wanting in life. There is this idea I have been processing that you can't let pragmatism take center stage if the world isn't set up to be practical in the first place. This won't provide the fertile land to let an unencumbered imagination grow. If the environment is wrong, the goals will not be met. Maybe some would say structuring life this way is foolish, but to me, moving aimlessly between jobs can be foolish. That is not to say that a person is foolish to take up a particular job. What I am trying to say is that our priorities on the types of work people do is often not fully realized for what provides society the most value. As I go through the thoughts on these pages, I want to echo the lyrics of a musician I grew up with as he is searching for that earlier child. I'm sitting here with pen and paper. I'm listening now. And then let me just click here. Okay. Okay, and that takes us to the first of the other works, it looks like. So let's go back. Let's talk about this a little bit. So it kind of looks like we've got sort of a part poem, part essay, assuming that this whole page is all one work. And that's fine. And there are a lot of those actually, like essays that kind of present themselves as poems or vice versa. It's not bad. Uh, I'm trying to think. I read an erasure poetry book like 6 months ago that was basically in that form, part poem, part essay, and I liked it a lot. But the name eludes me right now, and maybe if I'll think of it, I'll come back to it. But I will say, so kind of the first thing that both catches my eye and jars me about this poem is kind of that we go in and out of rhyming. It's a little distracting almost. And some pieces do get away with that. They get away with switching from rhyme to free verse, and it's fine. But yeah, like I said, just a little distracting in this piece, if I'm being honest. Um, Now, Kip, I'm not sure if Kip's first language is English. Um, yeah, I can't say that for certain. I never know when somebody submits work here. But I will say, a lot of these rhymes, not all of them, but a good portion of them, do feel a little simplistic. But like sunrise and stylized, that's a good rhyme. I like that a lot. But like gold, sold, way, day, a little basic. And like sometimes basic rhymes really work, but I feel like they don't really mesh with what this piece is going for. We have an interesting opening. I do like the opener, this idea of the street of gold in Revelations. It's been a long time since I've read Revelations. I can't confirm if there actually is a street of gold in it, but I kind of like that that's where we start. And then the rest of the poem is kind of about like growing up and nostalgia. I think it's interesting to try and, piece together the connection between that and the rest of the piece. Kind of neat. Um, We have some decent imagery here. I like focusing on color for sure. Orange bricks and yellow doors. Sounds very much like sunshine, like a street of gold for sure. Um, I like the concept too. I was going to mention that how you're revisiting this place that you once knew and it's literally being changed before your eyes, right? So not only is it different in your memory, but it's also physically different than it used to be, right? I think that's a good concept and like uh a concept I've seen before, sure, but it's totally usable, totally workable, right? Like I can't remember if I've said this on this channel, but like there are a billion poems about love out there, right? And yet we keep writing love poems. So it's fine to take a concept that's been done before, but you do have to put your own personal spin on it. And here I do kind of see the personal spin working its way in. Uh, Also, I'm no graphic designer, I'm no website designer, but this is neat. The little window effect going on here. I also like the illustrations. Yeah, these lockers, and then I think these are the windows, right? So pretty good. Um, Aesthetically, I think this looks good, but for me, aesthetics aren't really my main concern when it comes to poetry. I know for a lot of people, the way a poem looks is really important, and like concrete poetry like this that forms a shape, that sort of thing really works for them. It's just not really my thing personally, but it's okay. That is just a matter of personal preference. So I also liked this grandparents encouraging me at the end of my concerts. That's like so relatable, right? For a lot of people, I'm sure, but especially for me. My parents and my grandparents were super supportive of me in high school, and they came to a ton of my events, including choir concerts. So that one really struck a chord for me personally. And I imagine it'll strike a chord for a lot of other people too. And I almost wish we had more from this scene. I know that we get a little more down here, but, like, physically, in terms of imagery and in terms of what that memory was like, I would really like to hear more about that personally. I think that would be some concrete, tangible things that we can use to both ground us in the poem and also relate further to the poem. Um, Another thing I wanted sorry, my thoughts are pretty disjointed here, this is a long piece, which is fine. But another thing I wanted to point out was that sometimes the rhymes felt a little bit forced. Let me see if I can find an example. I guess this is a fine example. The donations to make the lives of the future bright. It's just a little awkwardly phrased, like poetry doesn't have to sound conversational, but a lot of this poem does have, like, a very sensical conversational tone, but then in the moments where it's time to rhyme again, the phrases have to sound a little weird to make the rhymes work, right? And so one thing I would actually suggest on this piece, what if you were to just write it in all free verse or to write it entirely as, like, a personal essay? How would that change things? Like, I can't say for sure that it would be stronger, and maybe, on the next draft, you do free verse, and then maybe on the draft after that, you go back to rhyming. I think I think this is a strong exercise for any poem is to just play with the structure a little bit and decide, is the rhyming working? If it's not working, let me try it in free verse. And maybe when you try it in free verse, you get new ideas and you're like, oh, well, maybe I want to try incorporating that into the rhyme too. And you go back to rhyming and it actually sounds great, right? I can't say for sure, but I think there is value in just experimenting with structure on any given piece. So that's just one thing to consider for future drafts if you're looking to redraft this one. So, um, yeah, those would be my main pieces, would be like, give us more concrete memories from high school, show us what it was like. Yeah, do some showing, and then also just play around with the structure a little bit. But yeah, this is a good basis for something that I think could be really, like, touching. And like I said, it's already pretty relatable, but it could be even more so. It could be really impactful in its use of memory, I think. So that was a good one to start with. Uh, Kip recommended these poems, which I think he called the black poems, the black section. Yeah. So um, when all color is not there, we just don't pay enough mind to this phenomenal occurrence. It has an absence of hue, a characteristic so rare, these traits had no other coloration transference. How can incredible abundance come out of void? Bold, rich, sophisticated, deep, masculine, strong, and tough, all deployed. The color is distinguished in its quiescence to lull you asleep, or can awaken you in a contemplative zest. Surroundings disappear to help you tighten your aim as one oscillates from resolved focus to deep rest. Black is broadly a mystery, all the same. Okay, interesting. Um, so I guess I'll get nitpicky here for a second. Sorry, first of all, actually, aesthetics, again, 10 out of 10. I love the way this looks. I like the Panther, jaguar, one of the two. Like that a lot, for real, for real. And the white on black is good. So, really, this looks great. Now, in speaking about the actual poetry, um, like I said, I'm gonna get nitpicky here for a second. I'm pretty sure black is not the absence of color, but the presence of every color, right? Maybe I'm wrong. I'm no artist. But if that's true, then the first line is like a little bit funny because really it should be white instead of black, right? When all color is not there, that would be white, wouldn't it? That would be blankness. Anyway, like I said, you can call that nitpicking. I guess technically you can look at black and say there's no color there. So anyway, I think the flow in terms of rhythm and rhyme is a little better on this poem than on the last one. Um, I'll highlight some pieces of the flow that really worked for me, some pieces of rhythm in particular. I like occurrence and transference as rhyme. That's pretty good. Um, yeah. So let's see. When all color is not there, we just don't pay enough mind to this phenomenal occurrence. It has an absence of hue, a characteristic so rare. These traits had no other coloration transference. Mhm. How can incredible abundance come out of void? Bold, rich, sophisticated, deep, masculine, strong, and tough all deployed. I do think describing black as masculine is kind of interesting, and I would actually almost appreciate some clarification there, or like just if the speaker of this poem were to dive more into that, because that's kind of an interesting assertion and one that I don't think I've heard before. Like when I think of like colors and sex or colors and gender, I tend to think of like blue and pink, right? Like traditionally blue was the quote unquote boys color and pink was the quote unquote girls color, right? And obviously that was completely arbitrary. That was just something we invented, right? A social construct. But to hear black called masculine, that's interesting. And I almost wish the poem would tell me more about why it thinks that that's the case. Um, and then uh, I wanted to double check this word, quiescence. It's a good word. Inactivity or dormancy. Okay, so that makes sense in the context of the poem, because if we're categorizing black as like the absence of color, quiescence means, yeah, inactivity or dormancy. So it's like, it's almost like potential, right? Yeah. Like black is inactive until you make something of it. Like I said, within the context of the poem, I think that works. And it's a nice word. The color is distinguished in its quiescence to lull you to sleep. Quiescence. Sorry, quiescence. I just listened to the pronunciation. I don't know if that will come through in the audio, but anyway. The color is distinguished in its quiescence to lull you to sleep. Last stanza, or can awaken you in a contemplative zest. Surroundings disappear to help you tighten your aim, as one oscillates from resolved focus to deep rest. I like that line pretty well, as one oscillates from resolved focus to deep rest. I also liked the first line, or can awaken you in a contemplative zest. Yeah, there's a pretty good rhythm to those two lines. And then black is broadly a mystery all the same. So it's a pretty neat poem. But kind of my main question when I finished it was like, what does this have to do with me or with anyone rather, right? It sounds like kind of a love letter to the color black, which is fine, but I don't mean to sound blasé, but like, why should I care, right? I'm sure for a graphic designer, this poem would carry a lot of weight, right? And not all poems have to appeal to everyone, obviously, but to the general audience, right? To somebody who's maybe not a physical artist, like, what's the deeper meaning of this poem for them, right? That's kind of my question is like, what does this poem have to say about the human experience? Because I've said this multiple times, I think, on the main channel, but literature for me is all about what it means to be human, right? So yeah, That's kind of my main question when I read this poem is, what does this poem have to say about humanity or about me or about anyone, right? I hope that makes sense. That being said, like I said, there are some strengths here and they should be built on. This could also be a poem worth doing in free verse just as an experiment. Yeah. And then, of course, like I said, on subsequent drafts, you can go back to rhyming, but like there are some strong words here: phenomenal occurrence, coloration transference, um, incredible abundance, quiescence, and then that last stanza, contemplative zest, oscillates from resolved focus. I like those words and phrases a lot, if I'm being honest. And I can't help but wonder how they would flow in a free verse poem. So those are some things to consider there. Let's move on. This next page. What is this one? There's no title. Maybe the sidebar will show me. Nope. Sorry, I should have written down what these sections were called, but that's okay. So, again, I'm liking the look so far. It looks like we have multiple poems here, like this. Yeah, this looks like the start of a new poem, that section right there. And this might be another poem. So we'll take a look at these as separate poems real quick. So here's the start of our first one. Years have I longed to to a conclusion when the Buddha endeavored to inculcate the self doesn't exist, the self, it is only an illusion. Part of me seems so the same and stagnate. Is myself as a child someone that is no longer here, or am I like the rings on a tree, child, adult, outwards? This remains to me so unclear. Of all things can I not explain the familiarity of me? Break this out from the conceptual frame. My quest goes on several years or so. Same and different, what attaches to my name? What if the answer is neither yes or no? Whether the me as a kid and adult are the same? It is unclear. I cannot be identical. Completely different would be an equally wrong claim. The reality of myself is far more extendable, as I and this child inter are. What a wonderful discovery to make. Each different me interweaving and taking turns to be the star. Living without him would cause such an unbearable ache. Okay, I kind of think this next one is actually its own poem. Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna take this first section as if it's its own poem. So, last poem, we were talking about, humanity, what it means to be human, and how literature is kind of meant to communicate that from the author's point of view, right? And so I do see the humanity in this poem. It's a lot more clear than in the last poem, I'll say. And there are some more strengths here, but I do want to point out in the very first line, right? Years have I longed to get to a conclusion. This is what I'm talking about, where this feels like one of those lines where the rhyme comes before the phrasing, right? Because that's just kind of awkwardly phrased. Years have I longed to get to a conclusion. Yeah, it's like, like I said, poems don't have to be conversational, but at the same time, it just sounds really awkward, right? And I don't think poetry should sound awkward generally. Like you want to rope your reader in, right? And part of that is by making the poem sound nice. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. And there are a few lines sort of like that in the poem. Um, yeah, as I come across them, maybe I'll point them out. So, like, there's probably a way we could rephrase this while still keeping the rhyme, right? To make it sound a little clearer, a little more inviting almost. So rather than years have I longed to get to a conclusion, you could simply say something like, I've tried for years to reach a conclusion, right? That's not perfect by any means, but it's clearer, right? Poetry is tough because, like, a lot of the famous poems we read, they're not very clear. They feel like riddles, right? I don't think they are riddles, I don't think they're meant to be riddles, but they do feel like riddles a lot of the time. And so often when we write poems, we think, like, at least for me, I fall into the trap of like, okay, well, it doesn't have to be 100% clear because it's a poem, right? But no, when it comes down to the word to word language, that should still be clear. Like, you can still make the poem a little abstract and poetic for sure, but the beat to beat of the poem should be clear, right? Um, so when I read this, this first line in particular, "Years have I longed to get to a conclusion," it does kind of remind me of, like, older poems that I've read, like 1800s and everything before that point, because people just talked differently back then, and writing was different back then. So, yeah, it does sound a little archaic almost. But the good news is that's an easy fix, right? So don't stress too much. Just keep rephrasing until you find what flows really well. And this is a good tip, right? Read your poems out loud, and you'll see even your non-poems, read your fiction out loud too, your prose out loud, and you'll see what sounds awkward, right? So, anyhow, let's keep going. Here's how I longed to get to a conclusion, what the Buddha endeavored to inculcate. The self doesn't exist. The self, it is only an illusion. So this is another example. We could clean this up very easily. Just get rid of it is, right? And maybe Kip is working with a specific meter here and needs a certain number of syllables on each line. Um, Even Shakespeare would sacrifice his meter for what sounded better, right? Or for what was more clear, right? So it's okay to sacrifice your meter if you're working with a specific meter. So anyway, my point being, we could just rewrite this as the self doesn't exist. The self is only an illusion. Or the self doesn't exist. It is only an illusion, right? Either of those would be more clear than how it's written now, or not even just more clear, but would just flow a little better, right? So, anyhow, part of me seems so the same and stagnate. So, stagnant would be the correct form of the word there, not to split hairs. Is myself as a child someone that is no longer here? So, it's a good question, and I like that premise as a poem. But again, the phrasing there is just a little awkward. This, though, this is probably the strongest part of the poem, in my opinion. Or am I like the rings on a tree, child, adult outwards? This remains to me so unclear. Of all things, can I not explain the familiarity of me? So, the familiarity of me, I like that. That kind of sounds like something Shakespeare would write, honestly. And then this rings on a tree metaphor. Honestly, I kind of wish the poem were exclusively about that. Because I think that's really interesting. Like, because the rings on a tree represent, like, the years that the tree has been alive, right? And the former layers of the tree that the tree has now grown over, right? And so to compare that to the human experience, the experience of aging, that's really interesting. And so I think this poem could build on that metaphor even further, this idea of, like, the layers that all of us have. Yeah. But taking the poem as is, let's look at the next stanzas. Break this out from the conceptual frame. My quest goes on several years or so. Same and different, what attaches to my name? What if the answer is neither yes or no? Whether the me as a kid and adult are same? I don't have much to say about that. As with some of the first poem, there's not a lot of, like, tangibility to grab onto there, and not all poems need to have that, but I do think it's helpful for the reader, and I think also that's part of what draws me to the rings on a tree metaphor is that that's something tangible, right? Third stanza, it is clear I cannot be identical. Completely different would be an equally wrong claim. Again, like, I do actually like what these lines are saying, but the phrasing, right? Clean it up, clean up that phrasing. The reality of myself is far more extendable as I and this child inter are. I like that a lot. Inter are. That's fascinating. Um, that also feels kind of Shakespeare to me, if I'm being honest. What a wonderful discovery to make. Each different me interweaving and taking turns to be the star. Again, that's like a powerful visual interweaving with one's self over the years. And I think that would go like really well hand in hand with the rings on a tree metaphor, right? Because like all of these selves that we are, all of the different versions of us as we age, they're all kind of touching each other, right? And they're all kind of holding hands with each other. So I do like that way of framing it. Yeah. Living without him would cause such an unbearable ache. Yeah. So, all in all, I do like what the poem has to say. I think the poem in future revisions could just say it in an even stronger way. I really believe that this poem can be even stronger than it is now by focusing on all of the things that make it interesting already and just expounding on those things, those concrete images and those kind of peculiarities, right? Because there's a lot of poetry about aging, and so what is it that separates this poem from all the other poems about aging? It's the rings on a tree. It's this intertwining, interweaving with oneself. It's the inter-are. It's, what was the other? Yeah, it's the familiarity of me, right? So yeah, just expound on those things. All right, next up. The page turns on this early morn as one goes to the next. With each sheet a new idea is born, leafing through the many chapters of text. For a brief couple of minutes, one student may share what they read, though the talking kept within limits. A pared down update on what the book said. I would occasionally glance away from my book to the one over my neighbor's shoulder. What world could I explore if I took a look to what that literature's holder? Oh, to talk to that literature's holder. What ideas have perhaps planted a seed between his brief moments of talking to me? He turns to ask, for the last 30 minutes, what did I read? The distractions of group settings are not always key. Okay. I think this poem could resonate with a lot of students because yeah, it's like sometimes the classroom is not actually that conducive to learning about literature, especially when it comes to like reading in groups or reading in partnerships and sharing what you did with each other. So, yeah, this poem could resonate, especially with a lot of younger folks who are still in school. I think minutes and limits, that's kind of a neat rhyme. Um, but again, this one feels like one that you might consider revising in free verse and then deciding if you want to rhyme. Um, and there's a funny irony in this poem too, where it's like, the speaker looks at another book and is like, I wonder what I could gain from reading that book when they already have like a book in front of them and they could just be focusing on that, right? So it's kind of like a grass is greener sort of thing, among other potential takeaways. So there is a funny irony in that. And I'm not sure if it's intentional, but it doesn't matter because I like it either way, right? Um, yeah, I'm not sure I have much more to say on that one. There's a nice humor to it, both with this irony and otherwise. Um, yeah, keep keep at it. Do a free verse revision, and then I think ultimately this one probably works better as a rhyming poem because I think it is kind of meant to resonate with younger audiences, and I find that younger poetry readers do gravitate more towards poems that rhyme. So yeah, but that being said, it would still be a good exercise to rewrite it in free verse before ultimately deciding on the rhyming. And remember that don't sacrifice clarity or phrasing for the sake of rhyming. So next up, 12 to 13. My last year in a classroom full of tweens, all which are 11 and 12, except my age still hidden behind the scenes. April 4th, this topic we are going to delve. My birthday month rolls around. Happy 12th, I hear, but I need to come clean. No, not really, I expound. I just now turned 13. What? That is not possible. How? If you were born in 81, and it is obviously 93 now, that is 12 rotations around the sun. Harry, some boys need one more revolution trip. So after quite some time, he starts to come around. Well, okay, Teenage Mutant Ninja Kip. As he so gradually relents, his interrogation hound. Okay, conceptually, I really like this one. It sounds like our speaker, Kip, Teenage Mutant Ninja Kip. I like that a lot, by the way. So it sounds like Kip was potentially held back in school, and for that reason, his peers don't know that he's actually 12 going on 13 instead of 11 going on 12. And so I really like that as a concept. I really do. And this idea that, like, it was hidden from Kip's friends because Kip was worried about how they would take it, right? Um, yeah, conceptually, that's great. And this is another one that would resonate with a younger audience too, both young and old, right? Um, I will say, like the last line on this fourth stanza, April 4th, this topic we are going to delve. That kind of just sounds like a placeholder, right? Or like, again, it's just there for the sake of rhyming. Like, you don't need to tell me that. I know that we're going to do that. That's what this whole thing is about, right? But April 4th, I think, is key, of course, because it's the birthday. So again, like, how would this poem look if it were free verse? And it doesn't have to be free verse as the final draft, but like, if you were to rewrite it as free verse, how would that look? Yeah, just something to consider. Like I said, I do like the concept, and frankly, I think you could build on it even further, right? It sounds like Harry took it well in the end. Um, But, like, how did the other kids feel? Did some of them feel betrayed? Did some of them make fun of you? Um, yeah, what were the various reactions to this piece of news coming out? Because like, kids can be cruel, right? Uh, I feel like if I were a kid and I were held back or for whatever reason older than all my peers, if I were trying to hide that, I would be concerned how they would react when the truth came out. So I think that's something you could consider, when looking at this poem, looking to revise it. Yeah, otherwise, really great concept. It's a good story idea. It's something I've never experienced, right? And it is something that might, speak on the human experience. So definitely keep going. Keep going with all of these, right? If you wrote these poems, then there must be something to them. So don't give up on any of them. Definitely not. One thing I also want to note is that on this web page, the background is kind of slowly flashing from like orange to a lighter yellow. Almost like I think it's supposed to mimic a sunset. To me, it also seemed like a light bulb that's kind of old, and I thought that played into the aging poem a little bit. I think, let's see, both of these poems have been about aging, haven't they? So kind of neat. Um, oh, we've done three poems. Sorry, this poem and the first one were about aging. Not as much this one, but still. All right, we've got a poem here. Beats bumping from the school lunch DJ, blasting out of car trips with friends. First thing I'd hear morning radio say, I'm searching for a real love, it contends. Someone to set my heart free. If life were sane, no effort you'd heave. Why so tireless toil need there be? Scores do right, and they get no reprieve. I guess I'm just a little confused about what that ending means, and this is another danger of like having your poem rhyme because sometimes you want that rhyme so badly that you sacrifice um I've been using this word a lot, but clarity, right? So I understand that the speaker in this poem is listening to a DJ, their school lunch DJ, which is interesting. I'm trying to think, like, when would my school even have a school lunch DJ? Like, if it were some holiday or something, like if there were a party going on. So it's an intriguing setup, it really is. Um, or like by school lunch DJ, do they just mean that there's a boombox at the lunch table? Let's keep going. Beats bumping from the school lunch DJ, blasting out of car trips with friends. So they're in the car during lunch, I guess. First thing I'd hear morning radio say. So are we listening to morning radio or the school lunch DJ? I'm searching for a real love, it contends. Someone to set my heart free. Those might be song lyrics, I'm not sure. Maybe that's what the jockey is saying, the disc jockey. If life were sane, no effort you'd heave. Why so tireless toil need there be? Scores do right, and they get no reprieve. Yeah, I'm just confused as to what actually happened in this poem. Like after this line, until this line, I can understand mostly what's going on. We have a speaker listening to the radio, right? But then what is all of this meant to say? Or like, I guess I understand these lines, like, life doesn't have to be all work and no play, right? But where did that even come from? Like, that doesn't feel like the conclusion I would draw when listening to these lines. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't have much more I can say because I'm just a little unclear on what's actually happened. Um, so I guess that would be my advice here. My critique would just be to clear that up. And again, write it in free verse and just make all of the events and the thought process as clear as possible. And then we can start having a conversation about rhythm and rhyme. So yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't really say more about that one at the moment. Okay, last one on this page. When. The kid most of us boys would admire. Slick style in a band and class president. Seems his best, years many might inquire. Wouldn't be nowadays by the outward precedent. On socials, he said, the 2020s is the best decade of life. Less care placed currently on what others think. I do as I please. Such astounding lack of strife. Too much time spent on nonsense, I'll often think. Interesting. So, again, some of these lines could stand some rephrasing, like our fourth line here. Wouldn't be nowadays by the outward precedent. That just, I don't follow that at all. So, yeah, another one to clean up a little bit. But I think I like what's actually happening in the context of the poem. So, there's this old classmate that the speaker has, he used to be class president, and even now in the present day, they still seem to be like laid back and chill and cool. And I think there are certain tropes in fiction about like, the guy who peaked in high school, right? And so it sounds like that's not who this is, but like almost who we expect him to be. We would expect him to have peaked in high school, but even in the 2020s, it sounds like he's living his best life. And so there's a little subversion there, at least for me, that's where I thought the poem was going. And then the speaker, it sounds like, is kind of jealous and kind of wishing that they could also be so carefree, right? But at the same time, maybe this last line is supposed to be like the antithesis of that, where I can't tell if the speaker is like condemning this person for spending so much time on nonsense, or if the speaker themselves is spending too much time on nonsense, right? And they wish that they could be more like this person who appears to have no nonsense whatsoever in their life. I can't quite tell. But again, I do like the premise because, like, how many of us haven't gone back and, like, stalked somebody from high school and wondered how their life was going compared to yours, or even just saw it, like, on your feed, right? Um, I think that could make for an interesting poem for sure. So keep the concept, but yeah, rework it a little bit, make it a little more clear. Because yeah, I'm not sure exactly if this how the speaker is feeling about the subject. Yeah. Okay. And then that'll take us to the last page. Um, it looks like it says this word I'm having a hard time making out. Attending Eckstein in September. I think that's what it says. And looks like for the okay, looks like we have a few poems, maybe some prose to start. The only decade which I will be both a boy and a man. I made this observation over on the left on my previous website as an afterthought buried deep in a long article. When it is placed in the context of this body of work, I noticed how important it would have been to learn much of what I write here at that time. Okay, I see. So, like, when you look back at this picture or this text, you think how valuable it would have been to know what you know now when you were younger. Is that what you're trying to say? I really don't think many of the important things in life take that long to understand. You really don't need decades to experience the world, but for someone to highlight several main points a lot sooner. I listened to an app that collects wisdom teachings from several people all in one spot. The founder's reason for starting it was to provide a tool that wasn't available when he was growing up, so he had to go on long quests to find it. Too bad we couldn't think about these topics earlier in life. Maybe I don't think of my teen years as being more important, but it is clear now that that is the case. People spend most of their lives on one of two sides of the fence, having practically no knowledge of the world as a child, or being an adult putting up with the doldrums of a pretty similar existence from year to year, one day after another. I feel like I'm an adult that has no knowledge of the world like a child does. Sorry. Just a little joke for you there, a little humor in the middle of our reading sesh. Anyway, sorry, I'll continue. We just accept that learning can slow down at some point, even when the extent of crippling ignorance remains so great. Being an adult is rarely as unique of an experience due to having less rites of passage. For the COVID lockdowns to turn life upside down and break this stagnant, boring system apart is fantastic. Most of life is absurd anyways. You enter a career and independent living by thinking the society you grew up in makes at least a slight amount of sense. Then you live it and realize how nuts normality is. What I liked about school was the thrill of getting to the end of a multi-year experience and then accomplishing something like a degree. I am glad this website project was like this too. It had a lot of work leading towards one big finale. It was a marker in the road which many years of pushing led up to. Focusing on bigger goals really has a big payoff. Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. Um, it is nice to like have something tangible, something complete, even if it is like a first draft and you know that it's going to take revising. This is the way I think of it, right? I'm not saying this is what Kip has said in this little tiny essay, but that's what it makes me think of is like, I like being able to finish a first draft of something and like be able to look at it, hold it in my hands on a printed paper, right? And just be like, awesome. I'm like one step closer to something with this, right? At least that's the way I feel about it. So, all that to say, that resonates with me. Um, I think, as with the poems, some of these sentences could be streamlined a bit to just, I don't know, sound slightly more natural, right? And I didn't even read the text here. Let's see. Boys from Eckstein's awesome 2023 basketball team sporting school colors. Nice. Nostalgia. I like it. Um, okay. So I'm not sure if I'm to take this. This looks like a poem. I don't know whether to take it as part of this miniature essay or whether it's just supposed to be its own thing, but we'll take it as its own thing. Um, maybe it also is kind of uh, inseparable from the image that we're looking at here. So let's see. Stream poured down the school's hill, filling up the full width of the sidewalk. Each weekday they'd spill this flood of students' joyous talk. Embellished in mascot spirit pride, good things about the place they attend, not something they felt they had to hide, while walking side by side with their friend. Okay, that's kind of cute, actually. And remember, when I call something cute, I never mean it in a condescending way, right? Genuinely cute. Um, and then we have a quilt with shirts from various years, including one from when they were the Roadrunners. They switched the mascot over to the Eagles when I was there. That's neat. That's like a neat little piece of your school's history. I like that. Um, I really love hearing just I don't know. I love reading memoir in general, right? And just realizing, wow, everyone has lived such a complete life, and there's something really amazing about that. So, like I said, this is a cute poem. I really liked these first three lines and just kind of the flow to it. Stream poured down the school's hill, filling up the full width of the sidewalk. Each weekday they'd spill. I don't know. That just has like a nice ring to it. Um, and it's clear like what's happening, even if the stream is like a metaphor. I kind of I'm not sure that it is though. I don't know. Hard to say. I guess it is because like in this line we get flood of students joyous talk. So these three lines flow nicely and make sense even on top of the metaphor, right? So yeah. Um and yeah, like I said, it's just kind of cute, right? Kind of reminds me of yeah, like the friends I had in high school, and there's something valuable in that, right? I'm not saying it's a perfect poem. It's hard to say that any poem is a perfect poem, but there's a nice vibe to this one, and that should definitely be preserved no matter how many revisions it goes through. Then we have Divergent 8th grade memories. Looking to revive memory of junior high, so I rented from the video store 8th grade. A main character that was also quite shy. Little else was in common the deeper I wade. Bo Burnham's film was far too bleak. Most experiences back then are quite varied, and not just 90% awkward speak. Why ignore all the awesomeness it carried? Okay, again, that's kind of cute. Um, I did not know that there was a movie called 8th Grade, and apparently it's Bo Burnham's movie. Didn't know that. Kind of interesting. Um, yeah, again, it's just a phrasing thing where I feel like the flow and the clarity are being sacrificed for the sake of the rhyme. But like I said, as with pretty much all of these poems, it's like conceptually, I like it. I like where this is going. Because yeah, for most of us, 8th grade was like pretty shitty, pretty terrible, honestly. Because yeah, we're all super awkward and we're learning how to be like real people, and that comes with a lot of challenges. Your body changes, right? So, yeah, 8th grade is not great for most people. But it sounds like the speaker has an opposite experience. It sounds like they really liked 8th grade. And so that's kind of a unique perspective. And honestly, I would like to see more of that in the poem. If that's how the speaker feels about 8th grade, tell me about it, right? Why was 8th grade good? Like, I know that the speaker says they were a little shy, but why was it so good then? Tell me about those experiences, right? That's what would like make this poem unique and stronger, I think. More emphasis on the memories and the experiences. Kind of like with the very, very first one we looked at, right? That one I think was about high school, and there were snippets of what made high school really cool and really great for the speaker. Give me more. Tell me more about that, please. All right. Next one. Packs of kids fill the tables at noon, and in between nibbles and munches. Today they'll receive an added boon, as Scott compares two lunches. Contrast this meal made by his parents and how unalike it is to hers. Is this a plus? The range in how each guardian planned, but both still have the same love for us. Okay. Yeah, just taking that one in. It's another cute one, right? Um, and again, it just feels like one where you can go even deeper, right? Tell me more. What are the differences between the lunches? How do they compare? Is there also a difference in class between these two students, right? Um, is one rich? Is the other poor? How does that affect the way the lunches are? And like, how is it that we actually see the love in the lunches beyond just the fact that the parents have prepared lunches for the kids. Because if you ask me, that should be a given, right? Like, that's just what all parents should do. And some parents don't, which is terrible. Some can't, which is terrible, but for a different reason, right? Uh, I don't blame parents who can't provide lunches. I don't think that's their fault, right? But parents who don't provide lunches, that's just crappy, right? Sorry, I probably didn't need to explain that to such an extent. But yeah, tell me more about these lunches. The speaker apparently contrasts them. So do it in the poem. How are they different? Yeah, tell me more. That's I feel like that's kind of my advice on a lot of these poems is tell me more, right? Go deeper. That's honestly what's going to make a lot of these poems really unique. That's what's going to set them apart from other poetry out there is those specific details in imagery and in experience, right? Ooh, okay. We got a poem written on a napkin. At lunch, a teacher passes by the lounge for staff to have fun with us kids and laugh. One small gesture, forgotten moment in time, pours out all these years later in rhyme. Okay, again, this is cute, but I wish there were more. Tell me more. I want to know. Um, tell me more about this memory. Tell me more about this teacher. Why were they so special? And why was this moment so special, right? Yeah. The stench of the school dumpster was wretched, but I badly needed my retainer among the disposed foods. Oh, sorry. I don't always interject in the middle of poems, but, like, that's actually a killer opener because, like, damn, oh, that sounds awful, and so it's like, okay, what's the speaker gonna do? They're gonna have to get their retainer, right? But that's a good opening. You've planted a seed of curiosity, and I need to see it grow now. So anyway, sorry, let's start from the beginning. The stench of the school dumpster was wretched, but I badly needed my retainer among the disposed foods. Janitor didn't provide me a nose plug to lower this acrid, so the smell I continued to battle as its dominance obtrudes. Counting the minutes to when I can have new air inflow, when can I be in front of a dinner with sweet scents? I'll be sure to eagle eye that retainer, case tomorrow, as this vitriol stench gradually, mercifully relents. So it's funny. You probably heard me laughing as I was reading it. Um, I feel like I'm just giving the same advice on all of these poems where it's like either go deeper or clean up the phrasing or both, right? Uh, like I'm a little confused as to what happened at the end. Is like, so did the speaker get their retainer? They must have, right? Or no? It's confusing. Like, are they going to look for it tomorrow? I just don't understand. I don't understand what happened. Um, But man, that opener is strong, and, like, you had me really wanting to know what happened, and now I just feel a little bit sad that I don't. Um, it's a nice scene that you've painted, and I mean that genuinely, and it's a nice conundrum where the speaker has accidentally let their retainer fall into the trash, and so what are they gonna do? They have to get it, right? And so, like I said, you've painted a nice scene here where the speaker is trying to get their retainer. But yeah, I require a different ending. Oh, looks like that's it. Well, that's it on this page anyway. These were all the pages that Kip specifically told me to take a look at. So I think we're going to call it there. But Kip, thank you very much for sending these along. These were really uplifting in a way, right? And it's like I'm really glad that your school experience was so positive, it sounds like, because for a lot of people that just isn't the case, right? Sounds like elementary, middle, and high school were all great for you, and that's really great. So yeah, my main advice when you go to revise these poems, just give them a try without rhyme and see what you might come up with. Um, if you want to switch back to rhyme in later drafts, that's cool. But yeah, just give these a try without the rhyme and see how it goes. With the experiential poems, tell me the experience, right? Write it as it happened, and then see how you might turn it into a poem from there. Um, And then, of course, with those experiential poems too, yeah, just focus on the details. what separates your experiences from other people's, right? So I think those are my main pieces of advice here. But like I said, there is an uplifting quality to these, and I hope that that stays no matter how many redrafts you do. So, Kip, thank you again. Those of you watching and listening, if you want to find more, you can go to learningtowalkagain.life. Let me go to the homepage real quick. Yeah, learningtowalkagain.life. And Kip is also on Blue Sky. So, yeah, I think we will call it there. One more time, one more time. Thanks, Kip. So, for all you watching, keep in mind this is a rough draft or whatever. I'll see you guys in the next one.